So Gary,
An accident.
where are you from, bro?
I grew up in Colorado and been living in Santa Fe about 11 years. And I'm not going back.
But you also were a photographer, is that correct, in Colorado?
Yeah, I was a wedding photographer for about 15 years and rode the wave of photojournalism and finally got a little burned out on the pace of wedding photography and had this goal of painting. So eventually I sold my business and started painting. I'm not going back either.
Now, what do you call it, disclaimer, or putting everything out in front. I'm a good friend of Gary's, and I'm a little bit biased, but I love his work very much. And I saw a painting of yours in your house that did not look at all like the work that we currently have on display at ViVO. So I'm wondering, when was the moment where you came upon this incredible blend of abstract versus figurative? Because your work in the beginning was narrative, was much more narrative I saw at your house. When was that moment, or was there a moment?
Well, I can tell you, I started doing some, when you might say kind of typical impressionist landscapes that were inspired by New Mexico, just because that's where I get my inspiration. The light and the energy here is just turns me on. But I was doing these just impressionist landscapes, and I decided to try to boil it down to as few colors as possible. And so eventually I got down to this kind of a look where this to me is the Chama River, where it's really just down to just these essential ingredients. But then I realized that I love landscapes so much that I decided to bring back a little bit of representation to some of them. So these ones are kind of the next progression of adding a little landscape to it. But I still like just the colors, just the color lines.
I know you're a huge fan of northern New Mexico, and you appreciate the nature and the aesthetic of living here on a daily, probably every second.
Yeah, it's exhausting. It wears me out. It's just too much to enjoy living here.
So just, if you could, just take us, I know these pieces are all inspired by New Mexico landscape, so can you take one of them and kind of give us a more detailed look at how it inspires you? Did you go camping there? You know, that kind of thing.
I don't paint specific places, but I just like the energy and the whole spirit that Santa Fe, New Mexico captures. I'd say maybe on this one, the lines, people often ask what these lines are, and they, to me, just kind of represent the energy. I think they also kind of help refocus your eye and help it to move around on the piece, so they're kind of serve that purpose as well. But this one, I like it because I feel like I've got these contrasting colors down here with kind of a neutral sky, and I always try to do a neutral part of the piece so that your eye focuses, and also if there's just too much color, it's just too busy somehow. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but so this isn't a specific place. This is just kind of my energy. I paint standing, and I very kinetic, and so I don't like to get caught up with details. I like to just get the feeling of the place, and I feel like that allows you to enjoy the painting a lot longer because it's not all spelled out. You may see new things down the line, like a good poem or a good song. It makes more sense, or has a different meaning in a few years. So hopefully people will feel it's different in a few years when they look at my work.
Thank you for that insight. Your work, I see it all the time, and it never ceases to capture my imagination and draw me in, even though the same painting, if I someday hopefully will have one in my house, and I'll have the pleasure of seeing it every time I pass it. And but I do want to ask you before we sign off. I know you sold a painting to a guy in India, New Delhi. So I know you had some stories. So just give us a little tidbit, just a funny story from New Delhi.
Yeah, this guy came to Santa Fe for the folk art market, and he was from India. He liked one of my paintings. It was a large one. It was a 50 by 50, 60 by 60. It was 5 feet by 5 feet. And he said, well, I'll buy that, but I want you to deliver it to New Delhi. And he probably chose the wrong person because I actually took him up on it. So, but when we got to the airport, after calling 4 times to see if this painting would fit in the cargo door, we got to the airport and they said, sorry, the painting's not going to fit. So I had luckily planned ahead and brought a couple of cement sono tubes, cement tubes that you use for making a deck. I threw a couple of those in my car. I had some packing in there just in case. So we dismantled it right on the airport and rolled the canvas up carefully, went to stuff it in the sono tube, and it was gone. Well, it turns out there was some construction going on at the airport, and somebody had seen that tube there and assumed it belonged down in the construction zone. Luckily, my daughter, who was there with us, figured that out. Two and two together, went down, and sure enough, the sono tube was down at the construction site. We quickly stuffed it into the tube, packed it up, and watched it go down the conveyor belt, and it made it to New Delhi, and he's happy with it, and it was a great trip. Got to see India at the same time.
Well, thank you, Gary. It was lovely visiting with you. I hope we visit with you again.